Country music was born in a bar. A handful of singers turned real pain, cheating, drinking, and lonesome nights into the music America fell in love with. They were the biggest stars in the country. Then the Honky Tonks closed, and most of their names slipped out of memory. These are the 25 Honky Tonk legends who built country music, and the ghost at number 1 all of them were chasing. Subscribe before we start so you don't miss any of our lookbacks. Number 25, Floyd Tillman. Before there was outlaw country, before Willie and Waylon, there was Floyd Tillman, the man Willie Nelson himself called country's original outlaw. Back in the 1940s, Tillman did something nobody in country music had dared to do. He wrote a song about cheating, and he refused to feel sorry about it. That song was Slippin' Around, and it treated a love affair openly and honestly at a time when the subject was simply not discussed in polite company. It became a massive hit and cracked open a door that every honky-tonk singer after him would walk through. Tillman had a loose, jazzy, conversational way of singing that influenced Willie Nelson's whole style. But when Slick Nashville took over in the 1950s, Floyd Tillman was pushed aside and largely forgotten, his music out of print for decades. The man who taught country music how to tell the truth about love and betrayal became a footnote, even as the songs he pioneered took over the whole genre. Number 24, Al Dexter. Here is a man who helped name the entire genre. Back in 1936, a Texas bar owner named Al Dexter wrote the very first country song to ever use the words honky tonk in its title. He was not just singing about that rowdy barroom world, he lived in it, ran one, and knew every hard-drinking, brawling character who walked through the door. Then in 1943, Al Dexter made history. His song, Pistol Packin' Mama, about a man dodging a furious woman with a gun, became the first country record to top the national pop charts, proving for the first time that this rough barroom music could conquer all of America. It was so successful that Bing Crosby recorded his own version, and it got banned from some radio stations for a line about drinking in a cabaret. Al Dexter sold millions of records and then, like so many on this list, watched younger stars take his place while his name slowly faded from memory. But every time you hear the words honky tonk, you are hearing Al Dexter's legacy. Number 23, Hank Thompson. Hank Thompson took the fiddle and steel guitar of Texas dance halls and the smooth swing of the big bands and blended them into something brand new. They called it honky tonk swing, and for a while in the 1950s, Hank Thompson and his Brazos Valley Boys were the hottest Western swing band in America, voted the top country band year after year. His signature song was The Wild Side of Life, released in 1952, with his famous line about not knowing that God made honky-tonk angels. It spent 15 weeks at number 1, one of the longest runs in country history, and it provoked the answer song that made Kitty Wells a star, a woman you will meet later on this list. Hank Thompson kept the dance floors packed for decades with his smooth voice and his tight band. He was one of the great entertainers of the honky-tonk era, and today, outside the diehard fans, his name has quietly slipped away. Number 22, Johnny Bush. They called Johnny Bush the country Caruso because he had one of the purest, most powerful voices any honky-tonk singer ever possessed. He started out as a drummer in Ray Price's band and in Willie Nelson's band, but that voice was too good to keep in the background. When he stepped up to the microphone as a solo artist, he delivered some of the most heart-wrenching honky-tonk singing of the 1960s and 70s. And here is what almost nobody remembers. Johnny Bush wrote Whiskey River, the song that became Willie Nelson's anthem, the song Willie has opened nearly every concert with for 50 years. Johnny Bush gave country music one of its most famous songs. Then, at the peak of his career, he was struck by a rare vocal disorder that nearly destroyed the very voice that had made him a star. He fought for years to sing again. His story is one of the most quietly heroic in country music, and one of the least told. Number 21, Faron Young. Faron Young was the hillbilly heartthrob, a handsome, charismatic star who burst out of Louisiana in the 1950s with a swagger that made him one of the most exciting performers of the era. He had a rich, expressive voice and a wild, live, fast personality to match, and for a while he was one of the biggest names in all of country music. His greatest record came in 1961, a gentle, aching song called Hello Walls, written by a young unknown named Willie Nelson. Faron Young turned it into a massive crossover hit and helped launch Willie's career in the process. Young stayed a star for years and even founded the newspaper that became the Country Music Trade Bible. But his life was shadowed by hard living and deep struggles that he hid behind that heartthrob smile, and his story ended in tragedy. Faron Young was a giant of the honky tonk age whose name deserves to be remembered far better than it is. Number 20, Carl Smith. In the early 1950s, few country stars were bigger than Carl Smith. They called him Mr. Country, and for good reason. He placed more than 30 songs in the country top 10 during that decade alone, a staggering run of success that made him one of the defining voices of the honky-tonk era. He had a warm, confident baritone and a clean-cut charm that made him a natural star. Carl Smith was right at the center of country music royalty. He married June Carter and later married the singer Goldie Hill. He was a fixture on the Grand Ole Opry and one of the most reliable hitmakers of his generation. And then, unlike so many stars who cling to the spotlight, Carl Smith simply walked away. He retired early to raise horses on his ranch, content to leave the music business behind. That quiet exit is part of why his enormous success has faded from memory, but in his prime, Carl Smith was one of the true kings of country music. Number 19, Johnny Horton. Johnny Horton had one of the most exciting careers in country music and one of the most tragic endings. They called him the singing fisherman because he loved to fish almost as much as he loved to sing. He started out as a pure honky-tonk singer, and his 1956 record, Honky Tonk Man, is one of the greatest barroom anthems ever cut, a song so good that Dwight Yoakam took it back to the charts decades later. Then Johnny Horton found a second life singing historical saga songs, and in 1959, The Battle of New Orleans became one of the biggest hits of the entire decade. He was at the absolute peak of his career, and then, in November of 1960, driving home from a show in Austin, Johnny Horton was killed when a drunk driver struck his car head-on. He was 35 years old. And here's one of the strangest, most haunting coincidences in all of country music. The last show Johnny Horton ever played was at the very same Texas honky tonk, the Skyline Club, where Hank Williams had played his own final concert 8 years earlier. Horton had even married Hank Williams's widow. The honky tonk world lost one of its brightest lights far too soon. Number 18, Hank Snow. He was a tiny man from Nova Scotia, Canada, who became one of the giants of American country music. Hank Snow overcame a brutal, impoverished childhood to make his way to Nashville, and once he arrived, he became an unstoppable force. They called him the Singing Ranger, and he had a crisp, precise, rapid-fire way of singing that nobody could copy. His masterpiece came in 1950, a song called I'm Movin' On, which sat at number 1 for an incredible 21 weeks, one of the longest reigns in the history of the country chart. Hank Snow became a permanent star of the Grand Ole Opry for more than 40 years, and he was the man who helped a young Elvis Presley get his early break. For decades, he was one of the most recognizable voices in the genre. Today, that crisp voice and that remarkable life have faded from the popular memory, but Hank Snow was one of the most successful country singers who ever lived. Number 17, Kitty Wells. Now we come to the woman who changed everything. Remember Hank Thompson's The Wild Side of Life back at number 23, the song that blamed a woman for going bad. A songwriter wrote a furious answer to that song from the woman's point of view, and he needed someone to sing it. A 33-year-old housewife named Kitty Wells, who had nearly given up on music, agreed to record it for a single flat fee. That song was It Wasn't God Who Made Honky Tonk Angels, and its message was revolutionary for 1952. It said women do not go bad on their own, that cheating men are the ones to blame. The establishment panicked. NBC banned it, and the Grand Ole Opry refused to let her sing it on the air. None of it mattered. The song became the first ever #1 country hit by a solo woman, and it made Kitty Wells the queen of country music. She kicked down the door for every woman who followed, Patsy and Loretta and Tammy and all the rest. They tried to silence her, and instead, they crowned her. Number 16, Jean Shepard. Jean Shepard was one of the toughest, most determined women in the history of country music. At a time when the business had almost no room for female stars, she fought her way in with a strong, clear, no-nonsense voice and a backbone of steel. She scored her first big hit in 1953, a duet called A Dear John Letter, and she never looked back. She sang hard honky tonk from a woman's perspective, unafraid to tackle the real struggles of working-class wives and mothers. She became a beloved member of the Grand Ole Opry for an astonishing 56 years, one of the longest tenures in the show's history. Jean Shepard endured terrible personal tragedy, including the loss of her husband, the singer Hawkshaw Hawkins, in the same plane crash that killed Patsy Cline. Through it all, she kept singing, a fierce and loyal guardian of traditional country music until the very end. If a name on this list has taken you back, subscribe now and stay with me. The biggest legends of all are still to come. Number 15, Webb Pierce. If you measured country music stardom purely by the numbers, Webb Pierce was the biggest star of the entire 1950s. Nobody, not one single artist, charted more #1 hits or spent more weeks at the top of the country charts during that decade than Webb Pierce. He was the honky tonk king, flashy and flamboyant, famous for his guitar-shaped swimming pool and his convertible covered in silver dollars. His records defined the era. There Stands the Glass became the ultimate drinking song, pulled off some stations for glorifying alcohol and a smash hit anyway. In the Jailhouse, Now and Slowly packed every jukebox in America. That distinctive nasal wail was the sound of honky tonk at its absolute peak. And yet today, Webb Pierce is one of the most forgotten superstars in the history of the genre, a man who dominated the 50s more completely than almost anyone, whose name has somehow slipped through the cracks of history. Number 14, Ray Price. Ray Price gave country music one of its most important gifts, a rhythm you have heard 10,000 times without knowing its name. It is called the Ray Price Shuffle, that steady, walking 4/4 beat that became the heartbeat of honky-tonk dance floors everywhere. When Hank Williams died, it was Ray Price who took over his band, and Price turned that sound into pure magic. His 1956 record, Crazy Arms, spent 20 weeks at #1 and became one of the defining honky-tonk records ever made. He led a band, the Cherokee Cowboys, that was a school for future stars, launching the careers of Willie Nelson, Roger Miller, and Johnny Bush. Later in his career, Ray Price shocked the purists by moving toward a lush, orchestral sound with songs like For the Good Times, proving he could master any style. He had one of the truly great voices in American music, and still, so many people have let his name slip away. Number 13, Lefty Frizzell. You may not know his name, but every country singer you love was shaped by Lefty Frizzell. He is the single most influential voice country music ever produced, the man who taught the entire genre a brand new way to sing. Before Lefty, country singers hit their notes plainly. Lefty came along and started bending and stretching his words, sliding through the syllables, letting his heart decide how long to linger on every sound. They call it phrasing, and Lefty Frizzell invented it. In 1950 and 51, he was a sensation, at one point holding 4 of the top 10 spots on the country chart at the same time, with hits like If You've Got the Money, I've Got the Time. His smooth, aching voice became the blueprint for Merle Haggard, Willie Nelson, George Jones, Randy Travis, and countless others, every one of whom studied him. And yet Lefty Frizzell, the man whose voice lives inside every singer who came after him, remains one of the great forgotten giants, a legend hiding in plain sight inside the voices of everyone he taught. Number 12, Johnny Paycheck. Long before he became famous, Johnny Paycheck was one of the wildest, most talented, and most self-destructive characters in country music. He started out singing harmony and playing bass in the bands of George Jones and Ray Price, and the older stars knew immediately that this kid had a gift. But Johnny Paycheck could not stay out of trouble to save his life. Most people only remember him for one song, his 1977 blue-collar anthem, "Take This Job and Shove It," which became a rallying cry for every worker in America who ever wanted to quit. But that one novelty smash hides the truth about how gifted he really was. In the 1960s, he made some of the most raw, aching honky tonk records anyone ever cut, singing about heartbreak and hard luck with a voice full of genuine pain. His life was a mess of prison time, bankruptcy, and bad decisions. But when Johnny Paycheck stepped up to a microphone and sang a sad song, few people in the history of country music could touch him. Number 11, Moe Bandy. While the rest of country music was chasing pop crossover success in the 1970s, Moe Bandy planted his feet and refused to move. He was a former rodeo cowboy from Texas who sang pure, hard, traditional honky tonk at the exact moment the genre was trying to abandon it, and a huge audience loved him for staying true. His songs were unapologetic barroom laments, with titles like Hank Williams, You Wrote My Life, and I Just Started Hating Cheating Songs Today. That last title tells you everything about Moe Bandy. He sang about drinking and cheating and honky-tonk heartbreak with a wink and a whole lot of heart, keeping the old sound alive when almost nobody else would. For a solid decade, he was one of the most reliable hitmakers in country music, the keeper of the honky-tonk flame. And like so many who stayed loyal to the traditional sound, his name faded when the trends moved on, even though he was one of the truest honky-tonk singers of his whole generation. Number 10, Ernest Tubb. Now we come to one of the founding fathers, the man they called the Texas Troubadour. Ernest Tubb was there almost at the very beginning, and more than almost anyone, he brought honky-tonk music to the entire nation. In 1941, he recorded Walking the Floor Over You, a song about pacing back and forth all night worrying over a lost love, and it became a massive hit that helped to define the entire honky-tonk sound. Ernest Tubb was that deep, plain, from the heart voice that made ordinary working people feel like he was singing directly to them. He was not the most polished singer, and he knew it, but that was exactly the point. He sounded like a real man, and America loved him for it. He opened his famous record shop in Nashville and hosted the Midnight Jamboree radio show, giving countless young stars their first break. Ernest Tubb was one of the most beloved and important figures country music ever produced, the man who carried honky-tonk out of the Texas beer joints and into the living rooms of the whole country. Number 9, Marty Robbins. Marty Robbins might have been the most versatile talent on this entire list. He could sing anything. He started as a honky-tonk singer, but he could just as easily croon a soft romantic ballad, belt out a rock and roll number, or spin a cinematic western tale, and he did all of it at the very top of the charts. He had a warm, effortless, gorgeous voice that made every style sound easy. His masterpiece came in 1959, the western epic El Paso, a sweeping story song about love and death on the Texas border that ran nearly 5 minutes long, far past what radio wanted, and became an enormous number one hit anyway. It won the very first Grammy ever awarded for a country song. Marty Robbins was also a passionate race car driver who competed in NASCAR events even at the height of his fame. He was a genuine star for 3 straight decades. And yet, for such a giant talent, one of the most gifted entertainers country music ever had, his name has faded far more than it ever should have. Number 8, Buck Owens. While Nashville was busy drowning country music in strings and background singers, a man out in Bakersfield, California, was building a harder, brighter, electric sound that would save the honky-tonk spirit. That man was Buck Owens, and along with his brilliant guitar player and singing partner Don Rich, he created the Bakersfield sound, a twangy, driving Fender Telecaster style that was the perfect antidote to slick Nashville. Between 1963 and 1967, Buck Owens and his band, the Buckaroos, were nearly unstoppable, racking up an incredible string of number one hits like Act Naturally, later covered by the Beatles, and Together Again. The magic ingredient was Don Rich, whose high harmony and stinging guitar made the whole thing soar. Then tragedy struck. Don Rich was killed in a motorcycle accident in 1974, and Buck Owens later said the heart went out of his music the day he lost him. Millions of younger folks only know Buck from the TV show Hee Haw, never realizing he was one of the most important and influential honky tonk artists who ever lived. Number 7. Conway Twitty. Conway Twitty scored more number one hits than any other artist in the history of country music, 40 of them in total, a record that stood for 2 full decades. Think about that. This man topped the country chart 40 separate times, and yet today, outside of country's most devoted fans, he is oddly underappreciated for just how completely he dominated the genre. He started out as a rock and roll singer, even scoring a giant pop hit, before he turned to the country music he truly loved and became a superstar all over again. Conway had a rich, smooth, unmistakable voice and a gift for singing romantic songs that spoke directly to women. Records like Hello Darlin' and a long string of tender, sometimes daring love songs. He was also one of the shrewdest businessmen in Nashville. Conway Twitty was a giant, a man who outcharted every legend you can name, and his relatively quiet legacy is one of the strangest cases of a superstar slipping from the spotlight in all of country music. Number 6. Merle Haggard. Merle Haggard lived the honky-tonk life before he ever sang about it. As a young man, he did real time in San Quentin prison, and it was there, watching Johnny Cash perform for the inmates, that he decided to turn his life around through music. What followed was one of the greatest careers country music has ever seen. They called him the Hag, and he wrote and sang with a hard, honest authority that came straight from a life of genuine struggle. He was the greatest disciple of Lefty Frizzell, and he took Lefty's phrasing and built on it to become a master songwriter and singer. His songs, Mama Tried, Sing Me Back Home, Okie from Muskogee, were the voice of the working man, of prison and poverty, and hard-won pride. Merle Haggard is not quite forgotten. He is too big for that, but as the years pass, fewer young people know just how towering he was. One of the 2 or 3 greatest artists in the entire history of the genre, a true honky-tonk poet. Number 5. Loretta Lynn. The story of Loretta Lynn is one of the most remarkable in all of American music. She was a coal miner's daughter from Butcher Holler, Kentucky, married at a very young age, a mother of 4, before she was 20. And out of that hard life, she built herself into one of the most important and beloved country singers who ever lived, writing her own songs about the real lives of working-class women in a way nobody ever had. She sang the truth without apology, and it made her the most banned woman in country music. Songs like Don't Come Home A-Drinkin', Fist City, and The Pill got pulled from radio for being too honest about a woman's life, and every single time her audience made them hits anyway. She stood up for women who had no voice, and they loved her fiercely for it. Loretta Lynn is a legend whose spirit defined honky-tonk from a woman's side, tough, funny, heartbroken, and absolutely fearless, right up to the very end. Number 4. Tammy Wynette. They called her the First Lady of Country Music, and no one before or since has sung heartbreak quite like Tammy Wynette. She had a voice that could break in the middle of a word and shatter your heart, a catch and a sob built right into her singing that made every sad song feel like she was living it in that very moment. And in truth, she usually was. Her signature song, Stand By Your Man, became the best-selling record ever made by a woman in country music, an anthem of loyalty that made her a superstar. She sang about divorce, about heartache, about the struggles of ordinary women in that trembling, unforgettable voice. Her own life was full of the same heartbreak she sang about, including her famous stormy marriage to George Jones. Tammy Wynette turned her real pain into some of the most emotional records country music ever produced. She was the queen of the country tearjerker, and the H in her voice is something the genre has never replaced. Number 3, Patsy Cline. Patsy Cline had the greatest voice country music has ever produced, and she was taken from the world far too soon. She was fearless, funny, and tough as nails. A woman who fought her way to the top of a business that did not want to make room for her, and once she got there, nobody could deny that voice. It was rich, powerful, aching, and utterly in control, equally at home in a honky tonk or a concert hall. Her records are immortal. Walking After Midnight, Crazy, She's Got You, I Fall to Pieces, each one a masterclass in singing pure emotion. She was crossing over into massive mainstream stardom, poised to become one of the biggest stars in all of American music. And then, in 1963, at just 30 years old, Patsy Cline was killed in a plane crash. The loss was staggering, one of the great what-if stories in music history, but the recordings she left behind made sure that voice, the finest country music ever had, would live forever. Number 2, George Jones. Ask almost any country singer alive who the greatest of them all was, and they will give you the same answer. George Jones. They called him the Possum, and he possessed a voice of such impossible expression and control that legends from Frank Sinatra to Waylon Jennings stood in awe of him. If we all could sing like we wanted to, Waylon once sang, we would all sound like George Jones. He started as a hard honky-tonk singer in the 1950s and never stopped, scoring #1 hits in 5 straight decades. His 1980 masterpiece, He Stopped Loving Her Today, a song about a man who loved a woman until the day he died, is regularly called the single greatest country song ever recorded. And Jones lived every bit of the heartbreak he sang, battling addiction so severe his wife once hid the car keys, so he drove a lawnmower to the bar. Through all of it, that voice never failed him. George Jones was the greatest singer country music ever produced, and even he spent his whole life idolizing one man, his hero, the ghost at the top of this list. Number 1, Hank Williams. Here he is, the ghost that every single singer on this list was chasing. Hank Williams is the founding father of it all, the man who took honky-tonk music and turned it into something eternal, and he did it in a career that lasted only about 6 years before it was over. In that tiny window, Hank Williams wrote and recorded the songs that became the foundation of all country music. Your Cheatin' Heart, I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry, Hey Good Lookin', Cold, Cold Heart. He had a lonesome, haunted voice that seemed to carry all the pain in the world, and he wrote with a simple, piercing honesty that has never been matched. He was country music's first true superstar and its first great tragedy. Racked by chronic pain, alcohol, and morphine, Hank Williams died in the back seat of his Cadillac on New Year's Day, 1953, being driven to yet another show. He was just 29 years old, and in dying so young, he became immortal. Every honky-tonk singer who came after, George Jones, Merle Haggard, all of them, measured themselves against Hank Williams and knew they were chasing his ghost. He is the reason this music exists. These were the 25 legends who built country music in smoky rooms and beer joints across America, who turned heartbreak into art and then slipped from memory while the world moved on. But turn on a country station tonight in a truck or a kitchen or a bar somewhere and you will still hear them, every one of them. They never really left. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe and watch the next video above.